Evening. Happy Wednesday and all that. As promised, ever so slightly later than promised, episode 3 of the Rugby World Cup roundup. So we will be going through a little bit of a review of round 3 of the Rugby World Cup tonight. I am accompanied by Sneaky Guinness. Just on the note of a Sneaky Guinness, guys, if you do want to sponsor us, we're always happy to. And on the second note of that, something's happened to me since turning 30. Like, I don't know whether it's because I've cut my hair off or what it is, but I have become obsessed, even more than I already was, with drinking Guinness. Oh, there we go. I think this is a new record, Ziggy. 40 seconds and she's in. I have become obsessed with drinking Guinness. Like I was saying this to Laura when we were out the other night. A pint of lager just doesn't cut it anymore. After 15 years plus, I mean, I'm 30 and I'm from Darlow, so it's more like 17, 18 years. No, I'm only joking. About 17 years. Plus of drinking lager. I'm off the stuff. I can't do it. 1 pint of Moretti, it's just not for me anymore. It's got to be the black stuff. So, you know, call us the lesbian Guinness gurus, whatever. We'll go around and try your Guinness for you, because over the last few weeks, Guinness has been my go-to, and I just can't get away from the stuff. Even the bloody 0% Guinness, spot on. I'll have that any day of the week. I'd have that over a pint of full fat lager. So yeah, cheers, happy Wednesday. Was hoping to get this podcast out in advance of the biggest game of round 4 that just happened a couple of hours ago. Uruguay versus Namibia. 4:45 was the kickoff. Uruguay won. They got the bonus point win. I don't know why I can't say Uruguay. It's such a hard word to say. Got a bonus point win against Namibia. I didn't watch the game, I'll be completely honest. We've been here, there and everywhere. Everything's upside down at the moment because we're in the process of moving house, which does mean that we will lose the mural on the wall. So once it finally goes on the market tomorrow, I'll put a little sneaky shot on of the photos that the estate agent uses, because I think it'll be hilarious to see a little bit of the beer candles mural going up on bloody Rightmove. I'm sure we'll get some offers based just on the artwork alone. But yeah, round 3, what did we think? What happened? It was pretty exciting, wasn't it? We started off the round with Italy against Uruguay. Nothing super exciting. Uruguay kind of showed up. Oh, that's my pen. Thank you, love. Italy kind of did what was expected. Uruguay sort of showed up. It was one of them games that I was kind of backing to start with to maybe be a little bit of a surprise, but it wasn't particularly, was it? The team that we thought would win. I've just realised as well on the video, these aren't my legs or anyone else's legs. It's my pregnancy pillow that Laura kindly bought me about 3 years ago, and I'm obsessed with, and it's followed me around everywhere. So it's the comfiest thing in the world. If you've not got one, if you've not had a go on one, get the go on one, because they're unreal. Ziggy also quite likes it, as you can see. It appears that she's sitting here now for the rest of the podcast. So yeah, started off with Italy v Uruguay. Nothing super exciting. The result that we all expected, really. Thought it might be one for Uruguay to turn them over, but unfortunately it wasn't. We then had France against Namibia, 96-0. Keep it under 50, or keep it under 90 as the saying goes. Did think that they were going to top a ton, but wasn't to be in the end. Bit of a shocking one in that game though. Why play DuPont at all? And why keep him on after half time? And why, you know, risk anything bad happening to him, which did inevitably happen. Got his cheekbone smashed to bits. We have heard over the last couple of days though that he's getting one of them little plastic guards made for his face, and hard as fuck. Get the man in there, like Brad Barrett playing with his little Superman mask on. Pretty cool. Some unbelievable tries in that from France. Just nothing shown up at all by Namibia, which is a shame. We're going to get onto the whole tier 2 situation a bit later, because I think there's a little bit of a divide there going on in tier 2 as well in terms of quality. I mean, it's obvious, any of you can see that, but in terms of separating the tournaments out, there's definitely a better way to do it. Argentina against Samoa, disappointing, but for both teams it was disappointing. Argentina, it's not really at the races, are they? I don't really know what's going on with Michael Checker. It's a shame, because I was expecting big things. Argentina are one of them classic bogey teams for other teams out there. they've been a little bit of a bogey team in the past for England. And Samoa have it in them to be dangerous as well. Just 1 second. If you're going to stay there, you can't snore like that, sweetheart, because you're making too much noise. You sound like the Gruffalo. Is it Gruffalo? Argentina against Samoa, was expecting bigger and better things. Thought it could have been a sort of 40 points apiece game, but it kind of wasn't. Georgia v Portugal. This was a really good game for anyone that watched it. 18-all draw. Definitely kind of a fair result off the back of that. Georgia have been disappointing in this World Cup, but that's not to take away anything from Portugal, because obviously they ran Wales pretty close last week. I have a feeling that they might stick it up Eddie Jones's Australia this weekend. Fingers crossed. But yeah, Portugal have been decent is what I've got written down there, so that's a fair assessment from me. England against Chile, 71-0. Now, I talked about last week how people needed to be not quite so depressed about the England-Japan game. I actually thought we played pretty well, and some of the little parts of us playing well in the Japan game, I think, were massively shown up against Chile. I thought we did pretty well. I was expecting about sort of 55, 60 points in it, so to go that 10 points further is pretty impressive. For anyone that can now hear a stupid noise, Ziggy's decided to give her paws a wash whilst she's laid here as well. It's a constant thing. She is also bleeding profusely from the fanny at the moment because she's in season, so happens to all of us, love. It's terrible, isn't it? It's also great when you're in the process of trying to sell the house and there's a dog with a bleeding fanny wandering around everywhere. But that's probably a little bit too graphic for the podcast, isn't it? 5 tries for Henry Arundel. It was his first start in a World Cup for England as well, which is pretty exciting. I thought Marcus Smith looked good. He's a boy who knows where the camera is, isn't he? Running in to pick up his own kick to score, and he knows straight away, make sure that I'm in the right position, because this needs to be on portrait mode for a TikTok video. He knows the man's got game. But so yeah, 71-0. I thought England looked decent. Obviously, Chile are the lowest ranked team in the World Cup, so we cannot be getting too excited about a 71-0 victory against them. But quietly and slowly, England are kind of sneaking up a little bit in this World Cup. No one was expecting anything good at all. That loss to Fiji before the World Cup kicked off, was being described as the lowest ebb for English rugby ever, and some of us, maybe even me included, were saying things like, I'm going to be a Scotland fan. Take it all back. We're looking all right. Again, typical English arrogance. I know what it's like. When we win, we're the best team in the world. When we lose, someone needs to get sacked. We're terrible, aren't we? South Africa, Ireland. I could talk for probably a good solid 80 minutes about this game just in its own right. I've heard lots of people saying that it might have been the best game of rugby that they've ever seen. For someone that was born in 1993, I feel like I've been sort of spoiled in terms of some of the best games of rugby ever, but that was definitely up there for such a low scoring game. Only 21 points in total. Quite a lot of points left out there. South Africa again. Madness, just one of them, the most physical thing that you've ever seen. There'll be lads who played in that game who won't be right for months, let alone weeks after playing that game. Johnny Sexton, the man's got more grey hair than I've got brain cells, and he is tearing the pitch up. He, putting big hits in, he's got glass shoulders, he's doing his best. There were so many times where I thought, oh God, he's going to go off here. But the man absolutely smashed it. Johnny Sexton's one of them players that I remember playing when I was a little kid, and he's still playing to this day. His career has lasted longer than mine. Definitely one of the best games ever. There's so many things that could be talked about. People coming out again and saying the whole, they won that game if they had a kicker. It is so important. I put a little short up a couple of days ago just about the importance of having a goal kicker, not just for the actual points that you might leave out there on the pitch, or that you might obviously stick up on the scoreboard. It's more to do with the momentum swing that gives you as well. And I think that there was points in that game where South Africa had a kicker to be able to swing the momentum back in their favour. It would have made a huge, huge difference. It's so easy to say they were trying to take kicks from inside their own half, and it was Faf de Klerk trying to kick. So odds were stacked against them the whole time. But I don't even think that Lubbock needs to be dropped. They just need to find somebody else that can kick. Like Khaleesi said in his press conference a couple of weeks ago, it's a whole team effort. Maybe it doesn't have to be fly half that's kicking, you know, we all know that. We all know that really well. It could be anybody doing that job. 7-1 split on the bench that everyone was moaning about didn't turn out to be the advantage that everyone thought it was going to be. I didn't particularly think it was going to be an advantage. What is the advantage of being able to replace 7 of your forwards? It sounds mint on paper, but back goes down. You've not got the discipline out there. You've not got the threats as well. So I think sometimes Ireland posed a bigger threat to South Africa than South Africa posed to Ireland. I think the only team in the world that can intimidate South Africa is Ireland, and sort of vice versa. You could play that game 10 times and it would be a 5-5 split as to what the outcome would be. It was just one of them games that was an absolute privilege to watch. I was hungover after a big night out on Friday and got into bed to watch it, which was a mistake because I thought I'll fall asleep straight away, but loved every second of it. It actually, you know, cheered me back up when you're in the post night out come down scenarios. But yeah, unbelievable scene. So glad to have watched it. James Lowe, what on earth had he had before that game? Lifting Etzebeth up. The fact that he can even pick Etzebeth up is impressive, let alone do what he did with him. Fling him about like a ragdoll. I mean, there was some Irish boys massively fired up for that game. I think the other Irish winger as well. It might not have been the winger because it was Mac Hansen that was on the other wing. It might have been James Lowe again, to be fair. At one point, just picked Cheslin Colby up and threw him into touch as well. I mean, the lad only weighs the same as half a bag of crisps, but he's still to do it with that ferocity, impressive. I could keep going on about that game forever, but I'm going to try and keep this brief tonight because I'm recording another pod that's nothing to do with rugby tomorrow with Laura, so I don't want to clog the feed up with too much nonsense. We've got to do previews of this week's games as well. Scotland v Tonga, not a lot to write home about. A little bit disappointing on Tonga's side. I thought that they maybe had the ability to run them a little bit closer than they did. Players like Fekitoa and that sort of thing. Just a bit of a shame, to be honest. But I'm glad that Scotland got the bonus point win. It's one tick on the list of, you know, getting closer to still maybe qualifying. That is the absolute group of death. That is the idea that I think I was reading something the other day that said South Africa could still not qualify out of that group, it's just insanity, isn't it? I think it's still completely wide open as to what will happen in that group. Wales against Australia. I think I've gone through all the other games. I've wrote down everything that I wanted to talk about from the weekend's rugby anyway. Wales against Australia. Absolute shocker for Eddie Jones. Did not really want to get too much on board the Wales hype train though. Like, I think they played really well. I think Gareth Davies played well. I think Dan Biggar going off when he did was actually a godsend. I think that they would have still won with Dan Biggar on the pitch. I think they would have kicked a few more points. I think that at points though as well he would have gone for, you know, the slightly wild crossfield kick and whatnot. Not to take away from Dan Biggar in the slightest. He's a really good player. He's up there. He's one of my favourites, a little bit of a sort of underdog favourite because he's one who I would never put on my list of top 10 favourite rugby players, but every time I watch him I'm like, he's decent. Gareth Anscombe though, on the other hand, he's a little bit of a silent assassin. He comes off the bench and he just looked like he did sort of 5-6 years ago before getting all the injuries. He played really, really well, I thought. There was a few players out there that played really well. Nick Tompkins played well. He'll have been revelling in that because, you know, Eddie Jones didn't pick him for England, told him he was too small, and then he embarrassed all of England's outside backs, which was Australia's outside backs. That was a bit of a Freudian slip. But yeah, I think a 40 points to 6 result was fair. I didn't quite like all the wanking each other off in the bloody... After the game, the pundits, especially fucking Gareth Thomas, I cannot be arsed with him wanking anybody off, to be honest, and I'm sure the rest of the world can't either, but just about how fantastic Wales had been. They had been good, I'll give them that, but they didn't get a bonus point. They literally decimated Australia in every way, shape and form. Australia couldn't even string 2 passes together. And they sort of just ran out of time to get the bonus point. I do get that, but it almost seems like a little bit of a failure to not have got the bonus point in that game, and it might actually prove costly in the end. I don't think it will because Australia are as terrible as they are, and obviously they lost to Fiji. But there is a scenario where bonus points were going to make a huge difference in that group, and, you know, if I was a Welsh fan, I would be pretty happy with that result. They went into the World Cup looking about as dire as England, probably not quite as dire as us, to be fair. So to put 40 points on Australia in a World Cup is pretty impressive. So yeah, it was decent, and I'll give them that. I'm not trying to do any sour grapes, but I don't think it's quite the wank fest that it turned into in the commentary afterwards. But they do get very, very biased commentary teams as well. I have noticed that there's some games where you'll turn it on and it's just a wall of Welshmen or a wall of Englishmen. I mean, the wall of Englishmen is the worst because it's usually Clive Woodward and Johnny Wilkinson. Again, Johnny Wilkinson, one of my heroes, but he's not the man that you want to try and hype a crowd up. Clive Woodward, you wouldn't even use him to hype up mourners at a funeral. I mean, I don't know what the man's there for. He talks about things and comes out with analogies about rugby as if we're still back in 2005, as if Tony Blair's still Prime Minister. It's a little bit of madness, but the main thing to take away as well from that Australia game was Eddie's press conference immediately after the game was far more humble and had a lot more humility and acceptance of his part to play in what has gone wrong than his press conference the next day did. I think it's come back to bite him on the arse, and I'm so pleased that it has. His treatment of journalists and stuff. I've heard a few other podcasts out there saying, imagine if the man goes to coach back in Japan again after the World Cup and he's still getting paid by England and he's be getting paid by Australia. The man must be laughing all the way to the bank, a multi-millionaire in everything on paper, but the man has lost all his credibility. It's a little bit of a case of you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. If that was going to be the case with Eddie Jones, he needed to retire about full-time whistle of the semi-final of the World Cup in 2019, and then everyone would have a lot more positive things to say about him. Do feel for him on a human level, I mean, it's not nice to have to go through that, but I think it screamed to me of a man who just didn't care anymore. It's like when you've handed your notice in at a job and then you're just going through the motions for the last 4 weeks, and it genuinely might ruin some of those boys' careers. It might make some of them as well, sometimes adversity, tough times and all that. That England team that lost and got kicked out of the World Cup in 2015. A lot of those lads then went on to be, the best team in the world for a couple of years and go on a massive unbeaten run, beat Australia 3-0 in their own back garden. And that was with Eddie Jones at the helm. And fair play to him for all that. No one's ever going to take that away from him. And there was a little bit of a case of that, of the adversity and the loss and the embarrassment faced in Stuart Lancaster's England team spurred those 9, 10, 11 lads on to play really well once Eddie Jones was at the helm. You can hope that the same thing might happen, but maybe that bounce back effect needs to happen with a different head coach. You do also hear about dissent in the ranks. You heard about Danny Cipriani and Eddie Jones wanting to talk about the birds that he'd been shagging and, just inappropriateness in general, a little bit cliquey and a little bit cult-like, immediately taking a shine to certain players, and players that he likes always talk really highly of him as well. You listen to James Haskell talk about him and you would think he was the second coming of Jesus, even though he looks like Yoda. And I got a lot of time for a lot of the lads that would speak highly of Eddie Jones, but equally I think there's players out there that would hoy him under the bus at the first opportunity, and I think there's some stories to come out further in the future. Let's just put it that way. It wouldn't surprise me. I think he's a bit of a queer fish. For any of you that follow us on Twitter, which isn't a lot because we don't really post a lot on Twitter and everything on Twitter is just rugby related, so if you want to go and give us a little follow on there you can, but I did post a few little funny bits on the Instagram as well, but I seen a picture on Twitter the other day that was this 90-year-old man who just played a game of rugby in Japan, and at first glance I did genuinely think it was Eddie Jones, and I was laughing to myself for about 20 minutes at the thought that was Eddie Jones. But I think the whole Eddie Jones going back to Australia thing, I don't think it's gone well for him. I don't think it's gone well for them, and I think it's a little bit of a case in point of personalities are super important in rugby. We all like to sit here and bag him and talk about him, and he's probably done more for the game just in terms of publicity. No press is bad press and all that than a lot of other coaches, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he needs to be in a position like that. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how that's going to play out, and he's being asked in the press conference, do you think that you'll keep your job? Do you think this, that and the other? And he's been non-committal and just a little bit irritating. Like, he's a prick, and the fact that he's saying he's going to get up and walk out the press conference, let him get up and walk out the press conference. He's not leader of the bloody Conservative Party. He's not in charge of our government. He's Australia's head coach. Like, hold him to account if you want. If he storms out, he storms out. A little bit of the Jose Mourinho's about him, a little bit of a God complex. You know what they say about men that are only that tall. So we had, as I talked about before, game of the weekend, absolute belter earlier, Uruguay against Namibia. I'm only joking, that's harsh as. Again, just on the note of other podcasters and people that are putting out great content, Tim Cocker, Egg Chasers, some of the stuff that guy's been putting out has been phenomenal. He's been travelling around France in a camper van, doing little mini pods every day over on YouTube. It is so worth listening to those. I actually got YouTube Premium earlier in the week just so that I could listen to Tim doing those bits while I was doing workouts and doing loads of work in the garden and stuff, and listening to it without the ads and being able to listen to it in my headphones. I'm not plugging him in at all in the slightest, but again, I think the fact that he's putting those little videos out like that, it's dead inspirational. It's worth definitely going and having a little listen to. He manages to condense a sort of feeling of what's gone on in the game really, really well, just in a couple of minutes worth of clips. Keeps getting passers-by, interviewing them, pissed people, you know, talking to people that are just wanting to shout down the mic and still managing to get some sense out of them. He's doing an absolutely fantastic job. And I did just briefly listen to his little review of the Uruguay Namibia game earlier, and it made me feel like I'd actually watched it, so that's cool. If you want in a concise overview, what I would suggest doing is go watch the highlights on ITV. Don't even bother with the sound most of the time. Definitely don't bother with listening to what the pundits and commentators have got to say, and go and listen to what Tim's got to say. I'm only joking, that is harsh. There is some of them come out with some good stuff, but Tim manages to capture the essence of that, and you know, without sounding like too much of an arse kisser. I think that's exactly what this needs. And the news that's come out today that they're going to maybe try and put the World Cup behind a paywall in 2027, bit of a joke if you ask me, but that's a story for another day. Tomorrow night we've got Japan against Samoa. Obviously that's England's group. Quite an interesting game to watch, just from the point of view of, you know, we've still got Samoa to play. Big physical team they are. Quite an interesting one to call. I don't know quite which way that'll go, so I probably will give that a watch. It'll be a decent game. Friday night I think will be interesting. There's a lot of people doing the whole, New Zealand aren't very good at the moment, what are they going to do against Italy? I'll tell you what they're going to do against Italy. They're going to win about 90-0. It's the only way that it's going to go. They've had a nice big rest, unlike everyone else. A little bit of humiliation in that France game. I think they're going to come out and put a decent score on them. They're sort of, Italy are like a mini, nowhere near as good New Zealand anyway. They like to fling the ball about with very little control, but without a lot of the skill to back it up. That's why they scare teams sometimes, but it's also why they can get 50, 60 points put on them quite easily by a decent team. So I think New Zealand will do that. Mental to be saying it, but I think that New Zealand are the dark horse in this year's World Cup. There is a sequence of events where I can imagine New Zealand again with a trophy in their hands, and I don't want to say it too loudly, but I do also think that England are a little bit dark horses in this. I think we've got one really good game in us, and if it ties in nicely, if we peak at the right time, I could see us losing in the final again. But I'm now going to look like a right tit when we get knocked out by Fiji in a couple of weeks' time, aren't I? Saturday, Argentina v Chile. Cool. It's a little bit of a sort of a what do you call it? A little bit of a derby, that one. In all honesty, though, don't really think I'll be watching it on Saturday. I am going to watch the Mowden game. I think the Mowden game is where you want to be this weekend. Darlington Arena. Mowden are playing Plymouth Albion. Always a decent game. Bit of a ding dong. Plymouth are a big team. They've got a big bloody trip. It's the longest away trip for either side. Obviously we've got to travel all the way down there as well later on in the season. A little bit of skin in the game as well, because obviously I want Mowden to win. And Lenny, who I've mentioned a couple of times on the pod, is a Plymouth girl through and through. Not sure whether Len will be making it to the game, but I'm sure I'll get a sneaky text either way at the end of the game. So may the best team win, mate. It's always been a hotly contested game, so let's see how that one plays out. I've written down here 4:45 big beefy boys. I think off the top of my head that's the Fiji-Georgia game. There is some big beefy boys on both sides in that game. I can't see anything other than a Fiji routing, But you never know. Georgia are a big team. They might pull their fingers out. It's just a little bit of a see what happens. And then Scotland against Romania. I was listening to Big Jim and Andy Good the other day, and they were taking the piss, saying that, it's a bit of a close game that for Scotland. They will get a bonus point again. I'm certain of it. They've got to keep things nice and open in that game. So that's 8 o'clock on Saturday night. Sunday we've got Australia against Portugal, 4:45. This for me is going to be the game of the weekend. I'm going to dig out my Portugal Ronaldo shirt from about 2001 when I went on holiday there. I'm sure it'll still fit me lovely, and I'm going to be supporting Portugal for the afternoon. I don't know why I'm enjoying the car crash that is Australia. A few years ago I'd have always looked at Eddie Jones and been like, not a big fan of him as a bloke. I think he's a bit of a little prick, but I like what he's done for English rugby. Again, I think he has hung around long enough to see himself become the villain, and we sort of all want to be able to boo him from the sidelines. He was actually getting booed in the game on the weekend. And then to finish off the weekend, South Africa again, but this time against Tonga. I think this will be quite an interesting game. I think, South Africa are a big forward pack, and they've been trying to flex in terms of the whole forward play. I have a feeling that they might, obviously because they're playing against Tonga, come out and play a slightly different style of rugby. It is going to be a bit of an interesting one as well, because they can't be too open and expansive, because they ideally need to try and secure themselves a bonus point. Bonus points are super important in that group. And I think it's obviously, being able to get another game under their belt. Ireland have a week off, and so do England and so do Wales, which is interesting. I know that I've seen pictures of a few of the lads from a couple of the teams out in Disneyland with their kids, which I think I'd rather play 80 minutes of test match rugby than have to go to Disneyland with some children, but never say never. I've also written down here, TMO interventions have lessened, which is good. The main TMO intervention that I can think of from this weekend, off the top of my head, that was a little bit like, was the missed one in the... I've written it down somewhere. There was a missed one in one of the games. That's terrible. I can't remember what it was. It should have been picked up. Oh, the Scotland-Tonga game, big one missed in that. And then obviously the France-Namibia game, the lad who took DuPont's head off, Dazel is he called? Has been given a bit of grief off the back of that, but he's also been given quite a hefty ban. A little bit unfair. It was almost akin to me anyway to the Curry red card in that first game. Sort of with these new laws, maybe it does have to be a red card. I mean, it is what it is, isn't it? But I think it was more the outcome, and it is in France, and you can sort of understand. But I think TMO overall has been used a lot more consistently, and in circumstances that make a lot more sense than it had been up till now. Hopefully it can continue like that, because I think that's the stop-start nature, and the Rugby World Cup's meant to be a showcase for rugby, isn't it? It's like when the Six Nations happens, but even less frequent, and it's for people who turn on ITV not expecting that there's going to be rugby on, and they've maybe watched a few games of rugby in their life and thought, I'll give that a watch. Someone who the last time they watched a game of rugby was even 3 years ago, turn the telly on and watch a game of rugby today, it's a very different game. So the TMO having to come in and everything requiring such a high level of explanation, a bit mental for me. I know I listened to Egg Chasers podcast, I think it was JB and Phil the other week, and they were talking about how maybe the TMO bunker needs to have an excited 12-year-old boy in there as well, and if he says to let the game continue, if something mince happened, kind of goes back to the whole leaving the advantage with the attacking team. If you've just watched something unfold and you're like, that is unbelievable scenes, having to call it back for a knock-on or a forward pass, obviously it's the right thing to do, but it sometimes just is a little bit sickening, isn't it? You'd rather it just have been missed and it stand, but it does also make sure the fair result is achieved probably more times than not. So TMO interventions have been a lot more positive in round 3. I talked about this very briefly before, New Zealand sneaking under the radar. I think they are. I think that they pose a big threat, and I think that obviously they can beat anyone on their day, and I can't even believe that we're saying this. As an England fan, and us knocking them out in the semi-finals last year, I think wasn't a shock to people, but it was very much a 50-50 game going into it, that. And then on the day it was not a 50-50 game at all. I think that they could do the same thing to another team this year. Depending on how the draw falls out and what happens off the back of that, I can see a situation where they might sneak through. I've also written down here, was South Africa v Ireland the final? As in, are we literally going to see that game again in the final, or is that going to be the best game of the World Cup? Both of those things could be true. We may well see them again. We may well get a different result. Ireland do have a habit of playing their World Cup final, as it were, a little bit too early, and then letting themselves down a bit later on. So hopefully that doesn't happen this time. But only time will tell. What else have I written down here? Fiji to play England in the quarterfinals, probably going to happen. Obviously, Wales were the first team to qualify through the group stages this year, just because of timings and everything. That's how it worked out. But again, it's something to wank yourself off about if you're Welsh, isn't it? I'm going to get some hate for this, I'm sure. I've also written down here, Tier 2 have been class. There has been times in this World Cup where the Tier 2 teams really have sort of stuck their heads above the parapet and shown up, but probably not the teams that we were expecting. The Uruguay game where they ran France close was pretty impressive. Portugal doing bits as well, you know, running Wales a bit close, doing all right against Georgia last week. They could genuinely put the shits up Eddie Jones and Australia this weekend as well. And then we've got like a little bit of a gulfing class with regards to teams like Argentina and Australia, who've just been massive letdowns. I've also written down here, I obviously wrote this when I was feeling a bit angry earlier. Why is Gareth Thomas still on the telly? We don't need to go back over that. There's plenty of people out there talking about it. It does get picked up every week as well on Twitter. I can't stand the man, regardless of the backstory, but with the backstory on top, he should probably be facing criminal charges for what's gone on, and I'll say no more than that because, you know, it's just madness. I've also written down here, has anyone checked that Matt Gitto's all right? I was thinking that, genuinely was thinking that on Sunday night after the Australia game finished. Seen him in the crowd, he's got a little pot belly on him, which happens to all the best fly halves after they stop playing rugby. Wearing his old school long sleeved Ireland shirt, and he was buzzing before the game, you know, giving people a little with his beer, and then after the game he looked like a broken man. And after his rant last week, I'd be interested to see. I think the rugby pod, the Good Bad in Rugby, Australia have put a podcast out this week, so I'm excited to go and have a little listen to that. What else have I got down here? I've got RFU. The RFU have put out on Twitter, I know some of you will have seen it in the podcast last week, that I shared the Mowden try that was scored with the last play of the game. Dead dramatic. I think it's so cool. I think it's really good. I've seen it doing the rounds on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube Shorts and all that as well. But the RFU have a hashtag now called Grassroot Buttes. And I did see a post that was on there the other day from, I think it was from the Nat1 Rugby Twitter, saying, why was the Mowden try from last weekend not on there? So if any of you are interested, any of the Mowden people out there, get that reposted, get the hashtag Grassroots Buttes on it, because it is one of the best tries I've seen with my own eyes. Unreal. Hopefully a little bit of the same. DMP against Plymouth this weekend, 3 o'clock kickoff in the arena, and that's everything that I've got written down. I've run through the fixtures for this upcoming week, round 4. I think this is where the World Cup starts to hot up. Even though the games this weekend aren't going to provide a huge amount of drama, there's not really any games in this weekend's lot that will provide a sort of storyline or a narrative in terms of changing who comes out of groups and stuff. There's obviously some must-win games for teams like Scotland, not just must-win, but win with a bonus point. And then I think there's things like, you know, Australia, Portugal. Australia need to win that just for a little bit of credibility. But yeah, I think it is all still to play for a lot of teams. A lot of the teams that most of us would have a bit of a vested interest in aren't playing this weekend. So we have got a little bit of a down sort of fallow week, as it were, in terms of that. But there's still plenty of rugby to be had out there. If you can, go out there and watch a little bit of grassroots rugby, do it. I would recommend starting, if you're in Darlington, I'd recommend starting with going down to DMP and coming and watching the rugby there. I think it's about 10 quid, 12 quid, your kids get in for free. It's a dead good day out. You can get yourself a lovely pint of the old Ginwari. You might even get to see us. But yeah, it's always a decent standard of rugby on the pitch. The rugby's on in the bar afterwards, so it's definitely worth a watch. just another little quick shout out as well. The Darlington girls played again last weekend. They actually managed to record their first win in quite a long time. I think they've been having a little bit of a tough time of it. So I'm chuffed for Snooky and the girls getting another win in. A win under the belt, and hopefully I'll get down at some point to watch a game. But I'm also in the process of hopefully maybe going to interview a few of the girls that play rugby, girls that I used to play rugby with, because I think that there's a little bit of an untapped market in terms of the personalities in rugby, but not in the way that we think of them, not the cliched, like, you know, they've been polished by the RFU, not making sure that you say the right thing all the time, getting some of them genuine stories in, which I think is super important. The thing that I wanted to finish on tonight as well is, for those of you that follow us on Instagram and have maybe come over to watch this video, thanks for a start for bothering to sit through another half an hour of this waffly nonsense of me talking about the rugby and with a continuous background noise of a pug snoring. I did post on the Instagram today that I would tell you the story about how the photo that I posted and the link to this video came about. So for those of you that might not have seen it, I did post a picture of me kicking a conversion on the pitch at Mowden, completely starkers. Well, I was wearing my socks and my boots, and I will say right now that it was 5 years ago that I took those pictures. So, you know, looked a little bit better with my kit off 5 years ago than I do now, and I'm almost unrecognisable because I actually had hair back then, not like now. I mean, head hair, not anything else. But yeah, 5 years ago, we decided to do a charity calendar girls style, but instead of with ice buns, we did the old rugby balls and strategically placed items and arms and stuff. And to this day, it was one of the funnest things that I've done, and there's all sorts of stories out there like that come about because of rugby. We obviously ended up with way more than 12 photos, and because of my slightly artistic talents, I was the lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, bastard that got to edit the photographs. There was a lot of bush removal went on, which is ironic because a couple of years later I ended up working as a gardener. So bush removal has always been a part of my life. But yeah, I'll post at the end of this a little slideshow of the photos. I think, if I remember rightly, I was July because that is my birthday, but featured in quite a few of the other pictures as well, because those of you that know me know that it's completely out of character for me to steal the show. If there's an opportunity to show off and make a tit of myself, I'll normally put myself front and centre because I can't help it. But it sort of paid off with something like that because we needed somebody to take the bull by the horns or the camera by the lens and stick a pair of titties in front of it. It's one of them things that I certainly won't forget, and it's one of them things that'll definitely make the highlights reel in 30, 40, 50 years to come, something to show the grandkids. I know that plenty of them were bought in the rugby club just with the purpose of terrifying people with them. I think I'm only joking, but it was definitely a fun experience. As a little bit of a sort of, you know, keeping the hype up around the rugby, I would love to know any little rugby stories that you guys might have. I know that it's one of them, what goes on tour stays on tour. You cannot talk about what's gone on, but if you've got any savoury ones like that and you want me to read them out on the pod, or would like to come on the pod and talk to me about them, hopefully over the next few weeks I'll be spending a little bit more time up in Darlington. So for those of you that are based up there and have anything to do with rugby, I want to talk to me about the rugby, drop us a message, because I think that keeping up the momentum with some of the rugby stuff on here is quite a good idea. I'm really enjoying doing the rugby podcasts. I know it's not directly beer or candles related. It is pretty beer related. I've talked in the past about how the two things go hand in hand. And it is something that I'm really passionate about, so to keep up a little bit of hype over here, tell me your rugby stories. The best one, you know, comment on the Instagram and stuff as well with any little rugby stories. The best one will win a beer candle. I'll keep that going until the end of the Rugby World Cup. I am going to be producing a couple of other little bits to do with doing the rugby podcast as well, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, tell us your rugby stories, do the old liking, sharing, subscribing. We're dead appreciative of those of you that do that every week. It makes it worth the time that it takes to edit my stupid accent into something vaguely sensible on the captions and doing the uploading on Spotify and stuff as well. So drop us a like, drop us a subscribe, share it with your pals. And yeah, if you've got anything that you want to tell me about rugby, tell me your best rugby stories, drop us a message over. And here's to everything in round 4. Hopefully it's a good one, and hopefully we can all be Portuguese on Sunday night. Bye.